in the Oval Office today here in Washington, and right to the point, with his newly sworn-in ambassador to China just feet away.
Are you open to pulling back your tariffs in order to get China to the negotiating table?
No.
President Trump declaring he won't lower tariffs just to get China to talk. Hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Those comments coming as the Federal Reserve Chair, Jay Powell, says while there is uncertainty, the economy also is in solid shape. Coming up, I'll show you how China was forced to respond today. Plus, black smoke as the intrigue remains. The doors officially closed tonight at the Sistine Chapel. We are live at the Vatican explaining what comes next in the vote for a new pope. Also tonight, a rare public appearance. The Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts live in just a matter of minutes. His first public comments this year, and we will show you those as it happens. Also, the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem in Illinois defending the administration's mass deportation policy.
Governor Pritzker has created a sanctuary here for those criminals and invited them here with free health care, free housing, free assistance, and facilitated them being protected from being brought to justice.
How Governor J.B. Pritzker responded later this hour here on The Hill. But first tonight, setting the tone. Just days before talks with the Chinese, an Oval Office ceremony and a warning from the president. Sean Spicer joins us here in a moment on what to expect next. But first to the White House, our Libby Dean on the president's message for China today. Libby?
Hey, Blake, President Trump really digging in here today, saying he has no intention of pulling back on these tariffs on China. Trump delivering that news with a blunt answer today during the swearing-in ceremony that took place in the Oval Office. That swearing-in ceremony being for the new ambassador to China. Now, these comments come after Vice President Vance signaled earlier today a significant trade shift is coming. Let's listen to what the vice president had to say.
We are in the early innings of a very significant shift. I think that shift is going to really inure to the benefit of both the United States, but also of Europe. But it's fundamentally, it has to happen, and it's going to happen under President Trump's leadership.
President Trump seeming a little wishy-washy here on these tariffs on China, given he said previously he would pull back on them, then today saying bluntly he would not. Now, we also know that there are going to be two of Trump's top trade negotiators headed to Switzerland for a meeting on Saturday. That's going to be happening with Chinese counterparts. This is a first, but no trade deals announced yet, Blake, and we're about 63 days from that 90-day pause on these tariffs expiring. So that's nearing, but no trade deals yet.
Our Libby Dean, live tonight at the White House. Libby, thank you. So as President Trump today takes that stance on China, the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jay Powell, said that they are leaving interest rates, the Fed is, unchanged. And he would not say if there could be rate cuts at some point this year, which, if it were to happen, that would lower borrowing costs, possibly yours. His comments watched closely as this was the first Fed meeting since, quote-unquote, Liberation Day. Now, here's a comparison of the Federal Reserve's sort of statement that they put out. There's a lot of words on the screen, right? I want you to pay attention to the red, and here's why I'm showing this to you, because the red is basically all the new things that they said. Here's what was taken out. But this was the line here. Frank, let's show this. They say the risks of higher unemployment and inflation have risen. So that was the change from the Federal Reserve today. But I cannot stress this enough. I watched Jay Powell talk for 30 minutes today, okay? The overarching message from Powell was, yes, there's uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. But also, our economy right now is humming along.
People are feeling stress and concern, but unemployment hasn't gone up. Job creation is fine. Wages are in good shape. Initial claims for unemployment are not increasing, in any kind of impressive way. So the economy itself is still, in solid shape.
Solid shape, he says. Now, while there is some uncertainty here in the U.S., it is also being felt in China. Today, from the South China Morning Post, new stimulus measures announced in China to try to juice up that economy. And U.S.-China trade war fuels job uncertainty in mainland's cross-border business. But here's something that caught my attention. You probably know the companies, maybe you do, Temu and Shein, two behemoths that you might order products from. Remember, Temu at one point just a couple years ago sponsored the Super Bowl, right? Well, according to Bloomberg, show the chart here for a second. These are their sales declines since the U.S. put the tariffs on, the 145% tariffs on. And this was the last week of April, okay? So April 25th, basically to May 1st. Shein is in the light blue, Temu is in the dark blue. Massive sales declines, right? Temu sales down roughly 10%. This is U.S. sales. Shein down almost 30%, giving you a sense American buyers on those Chinese products and companies, they're pulling back. Now, ahead of this weekend's trade meeting in Switzerland, President Trump made clear that he is not backing down from the tariffs on China. And when asked about exempting items for babies, such as car seats, the president took a firm stance.
I don't know. I'll think about it. I don't know. I really don't. I want to make it nice and simple. I'm not looking to have so many exemptions that nobody knows what's doing. We have to make it very simple, but I'll take a look at it.
Joining me now, Sean Spicer, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House press secretary. Hello, sir.
Hi, good to see you.
Nice to see you. When you walked into the studio a few minutes ago, I said what's old is new again, right? Because we're talking about tariffs and taxes. You remember the first go-around. The Trump trade team is going to be meeting in Switzerland with the Chinese team this week.
Lovely time of the year.
Lovely time of the year. January 2018 were the first Trump tariffs. There wasn't a trade deal until October 19, 2019. So that was 20-something months, right? What's the expectation, reasonably, Sean, that you see at this time around, given that the negotiations are just starting?
Well, a couple things. One, I think the president and his team have learned a lot from season one.
Okay.
Right? They know what they want to get. They know what to be careful of. I think the Chinese made a lot of promises about buying U.S. goods, particularly agricultural products that didn't necessarily pan out the way that they'd hoped. So I think they're going to be a lot wiser going into this. The second thing is, I do think that there's going to be sort of a deliberative path that Secretary Scott Bessent probably comes out with or announces Sunday night.
Okay.
Right? So he's going to, my guess is that this is about establishing a timeline. I believe that President Trump, President Xi get together. I've always said I think the end of July, there's some kind of meeting in China.
Okay.
I think this is
end
a
of
path.
July, so that's
yeah, so I think there's going to be two things. One, a path to set up that framework. Two, something that will allow de-escalation. What does that mean? Well, I mean, as the president said today, I'm glad he's sticking to his guns. Just the idea of paying that admission to talk, no. And I'm glad he's sticking to his guns, remaining firm. But he should get something in return for that, saying, great, this is hurting China. And most people said what he was doing going after China didn't make sense. The Chinese cowered a lot quicker than most people suggested.
I laid out both sides, right? Sort of what's happening here, what's happening
there. They're feeling it, though. And for all these people who said that Xi Jinping was going to hold out a lot longer, I think he caved a lot quicker than people assumed. And I think that there's going to be a path forward. Maybe Sunday night, we don't have the entire contours of that. But I do think that we're going to start to see something moving forward.
What about, though, that question today about, like, are you going to help out with baby items? And he's like, no, I don't really. The point is, though, Sean, at what point does the administration have to say, okay, when do we start to take a look at these things?
And I think the point is, before you go negotiate in Switzerland, you don't start saying where all the carve-outs are. Right. I mean, you don't show everyone your cards before you sit at the table. So he's playing poker, he's getting results, and I think that, like I said, I have decent expectations for what happens this weekend. I think Scott Bessent has proved to be an unbelievably adept negotiator and leader in this. So that's why they're sending in the varsity team here.
So there was we brought up a really bad moment for Scott Bessent yesterday here on the show when he was asked up on the Hill, who pays for tariffs? And it was,
no. I don't see. I think that it was.
You don't think
no, it was that member of Congress was trying to be a jerk to him, and I think he called him out on it, and he was not able to give. That was more, to be honest with you, I think that was more of like a verbal thing than it was an answer. So he was trying to answer the question.
So here was Bessent today up on the Hill. If what we played yesterday, I want to show the other side. I'll get your reaction.
This is the first time we've met. Is that correct?
No, ma'am. We actually met one New Year's Eve in the Bahamas. And I was...
He didn't make an impression. Why don't I remember that?
Well, you were much better at the electric slide than I was.
All right, so we got it back today, okay?
But here's the point. Number one, you see how, like, the guy knows the answers. He's brilliant. There's no denying that. When he was asked yesterday, the congressman was saying, who pays the tariffs? And he said, well, Congressman, who pays the tariffs depends. Because, again, I've had this situation recently where I ordered something and the person that I was buying it from said, hey, the shipper has agreed to pick up half of the tariff. So it's not, and he said at the time yesterday, it's not a simple question.
Do you think he's done a good job on messaging?
Absolutely. I would say he's the best messenger outside of the president and the vice president.
In 2017, when you and I used to do this, you were at the podium, I was in the
it was a little different.
I asked you somewhere between 1 billion to 1 trillion questions about taxes, right? I said, what's old is new again. There were 30-something Republicans today who wrote a letter to the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, basically saying, look, we cannot add to the deficit. Here was Chip Roy, for example, earlier today.
So if we don't get the spending cuts, then you're going to get increased deficits. So you got to get some sort of spending reductions to pair with the tax reductions in order to get the deficit down.
Any reaction from leadership yet on that letter?
I don't know. Call them.
The reason why I move you from tariffs to taxes is because Republicans are trying to pair these two together in order to tell a story. But there's real questions about how they get this done, when they get this done, and if they get this done.
So I'll answer it backwards. One, they will get it done.
Okay.
This is up there with funding government. Republicans cannot get reelected if they don't get this done, and they know it. Every single person understands that. This is fundamental to Donald Trump, to House Republicans, to Senate Republicans, and to grassroots Republicans. If we can't extend and make permanent those tax cuts, what purpose do we have, right? So that's number one. But number two, to Congressman Roy's point, this is the moment to reduce the size of government. DOJ has given the roadmap to Republicans where the wasteful, duplicitous, inefficiencies, et cetera, are in government. I agree with Chip Roy. We need to seize this moment. But
can you mesh the two, right?
Look, Blake, your point about what's new is old. We've seen this movie.
Right.
I mean, look.
So they did pass taxes, but I also remember they didn't get repeal and replace Obamacare done.
Sure.
Right? So this is the first big test.
But look, the bottom line is President Trump's number one, his tax cuts, which these are his 20s, these same tax cuts that you and I were talking about. They put a timeline on them and they expire this year. There is something ironic about him being able to extend and hopefully make permanent his own tax cuts. But this is literally number 1, 2, and 3 on the priority list. It will get done. It will happen in July. I mean, this is sort of like Professor Plum with the candlestick in the library. I can tell you how, but there's going to be a little bit of a food fight. And I understand why. Like, they should not rest on their laurels. They should make a commitment to cutting and reducing federal spending, and they should do all this stuff. But it's not easy. If it was easy, somebody else would have done it. But I think the will is there among the Republicans in the conference. The bigger fight, to be honest with you, I think is going to be with the Senate.
Right, and if they pass something, what the Senate does with it, and does all that get sent back. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right.
How about I stick around?
Stick around
thanks.
For the rest of the show. Sean will be back. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
All right. Still to come tonight here on the Hill. The first reveal at the Vatican, where we saw black smoke today, which means no new pope yet. We are live from the Vatican on the other side of the break. Plus, live pictures from Buffalo, New York. In just minutes, we will hear from the Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, what he has to say tonight. Plus this.
This country is desperate for peace. It's desperate for safe communities.
The Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem sending a message to sanctuary cities and states. But at least one governor says he's not afraid. Welcome to Washington. This is the Center of Politics. I'm Blake Berman. The Hill, back in 4 minutes with Spicer and his phone. All right, would you look at that there earlier today? Black smoke coming out of the Sistine Chapel's chimney during the first vote at the Vatican, meaning a new pope has not been elected. The conclave, though, underway to elect a new pope who will lead the world's 1.4 billion Catholics. The saying, he who enters the conclave as pope leaves it as a cardinal, truly highlights how difficult it is to predict the papal election process. Now, the College of Cardinals, draped in red, proceeded into the Sistine Chapel today, shutting the doors to the outside world. So when can we expect a new pope? Who are the possible contenders? Let's have a look here. The Catholic Church has 252 cardinals right now, but only 133 cardinal electors will participate. You might ask, well, why don't they all get a vote? Well, there's an age limit. Cardinals must be under the age of 80 to vote. A 2/3 majority is required to elect the new pope. Here's how long the last 3 conclave ballots have gone. Pope Francis, 5 ballots. over 2 days. Pope Benedict, 4 ballots over 2 days. John Paul II, 8 ballots over 2 days. The possible contenders, we can put some names on the screen here, who they are, how old they are, where they're from, etc. But the reality is, we don't know. They are all voting, or at least started voting earlier today, and will proceed at least into tomorrow. A cardinal will then come out, share the newly elected pope's identity and name. After that, the new pope will make their first appearance on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. Over to the Vatican now, and our Robert Sherman continues to report there live tonight. My goodness, what a beautiful shot there in Vatican City in a historic moment, Robert.
Yeah, a historic moment with the Sistine Chapel doors sealed. That means that the history books are being written as we speak, Blake. And to your point, nobody really knows how this is going to go. What I would say is that here in St. Peter's Square today, there were thousands upon thousands of people who came out hopeful and optimistic for the future, and most of all, wanted to participate and take in this historic moment. That's why we met people from Ukraine, Nigeria, South America, from the United States as well, who all flocked to St. Peter's Square in order to take all of this in. But as you pointed out, Blake, we had black smoke today, which means the work of the Cardinals is not done. So how exactly is this going to go over the coming days here? Well, there was one vote today. This is the only day in which there's only one vote. Tomorrow, there's up to 4 votes, and that's how it's going to go every single day until we get a pope. Here's something interesting, though. After 3 days, it would be Saturday, if we still don't have a pope, they will take Saturday off to reflect and pray on the future and then get back to voting on Sunday. And then, if after 33 rounds of voting, there's actually a runoff between the top 2 candidates. In case you were wondering, Blake, one of the longest conclaves we've ever seen in 1268, 2 years, 9 months. No one is anticipating this one to go quite that long.
No, I don't think so. You know, one of the things that we focus on here in Washington, Robert, is, and it came into front and center focus last year, right, is the age of politicians. If the Cardinals are over 80, they can be present, obviously, but they cannot vote. And you look at some of the notable members of Congress aged 80 and above. We see some big names in the House. We see some big names in the Senate. And it comes front and center where you are in the Vatican as well.
Yeah, the big thing with that, Blake, is that especially when you hear the Cardinals talking about all of this, they believe that it's their duty to pick the right person for the job in the present moment to lead the church into the future. So that's why there's such a focus on the age limit and under the age of 80. You heard that in the homily today from Cardinal Ray, looking at the global landscape, looking towards the future. So that's the big focus there. They want the younger cardinals to determine who is best to lead the church forward. Blake?
Robert Sherman, get some sleep tonight. Could be a busy day tomorrow. We'll catch you then. Thank you, sir.
Of course.
Still much more ahead tonight here on the Hill. This one is interesting. That is not Chief Justice John Roberts, obviously, but in a moment here, he is going to be answering questions. It is his first public appearance in which he's speaking this year. So why is he doing it? Why is he coming out now and talking? We're going to show you his comments live as the Chief Justice speaks. Plus, immigration. The Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem sends a stern message to sanctuary cities. What she had to say when the Hill returns. Just about 6:30 tonight in Washington, D.C. and in Buffalo, New York, and you are looking live right now at the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts, back in his hometown of Buffalo, participating in a fireside chat with the U.S. District Judge Lawrence Villardo to commemorate the 125th anniversary of the Western District Court of New York. A wide variety of topics could be discussed. We don't know. This is a fireside chat, a Q&A, but it is most certainly a rare public appearance as tensions surfaced between President Trump and the Supreme Court, but it wasn't always that way. Remember this exchange the president had with Roberts following his address in early March to Congress?
Thank you again. Don't forget.
Not clear what the president thanked him for there, but there was certainly tension after that. 2 weeks later, President Trump called for the impeachment of judges who have been stalling his deportations. Roberts later rebuked the president, saying that, quote, impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. In early April, the Supreme Court also unanimously ruled that the Trump administration must facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the El Salvadorian national accused of being an MS-13 gang member. I want to bring in Jesse Weber, NewsNation contributor, Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor as well. Jesse, Scott, hello. The reason why we want to listen in to John Roberts tonight, he doesn't talk a lot, very infrequently publicly. But I think, Jesse, this was a choice that the Supreme Court justice made today to do just this.
I think you're right. I think the timing of it couldn't be more fortuitous. I mean, you laid it out quite well. We're seeing this attack on the judges and the courts in a way we've never seen before. And let's also remember, Chief Justice John Roberts is being sued right now by Stephen Miller's American Legal Aid Foundation for a documents dispute, a FOIA dispute. So as this is going on, and as you mentioned before, he's rebuking the Trump administration regarding attack on judges, I'm very curious to hear what his comments are in this public forum.
Scott?
Yeah, the politicalization of the judiciary cannot be had. This is the only branch of government in the Constitution that is not a political process. He's trying to protect that.
We're going to go live. I want to listen to it. Want you to listen to some of it. What is John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, going to say? No idea. This is not scripted. Live in Buffalo, New York, as we listen to the Chief Justice.
Everybody failed that. Now, I had some bad experiences of my own. It was back when some justices were still hiring people right out of law school, and Justice White was one of them. And I was scheduled for an interview with him. And I went down to Washington, and they had just opened the new metro system, just opened. And you put your money in and you get a fare card and all that. I don't think they do this anymore. I'm sure they fixed it back then. But all I had was, a 20, and put it in and put in the fare. It was 40 cents to Union Station. So I got $19.60 in quarters or whatever. It was like in Las Vegas, the quarters just kept punching out. But I was a law student. I wasn't going to leave them there. Right. So I put some in here and some in here in these other pockets. And I walked into Justice White's chambers and I was jingling, jingling. He kind of looked strange at me, and I crossed my legs and $1.50 fell out on the floor. I didn't get an offer from him.
Tom Metzloff got that job, right? He clerked.
Yeah, Tom, my pencil ball opponent, got the job instead.
Yeah. So you really are a terrific writer, and you were back in law school as well. I still remember you're telling me that if I had a sentence that had 3 prepositional phrases or more, go back and rewrite the sentence because the sentence needed rewriting. Where'd you learn to write? And is there any one person who you credit for teaching you how to write?
Well, I think the way to learn to write is to read good writing. And I read a lot. I liked Conrad. I liked and Elmore Leonard. I mean, Joseph Conrad, if you want to write long and flowing, elegant sentences, and Elmore Leonard, if you like punchy sentences. And I think that helped a lot. When it came to writing briefs, though, I had a secret weapon. I have 3 sisters. None of them is a lawyer, and yet they're very bright. And I would send, for most cases, a copy of the draft brief to them and ask them to read it once, and then I'd call them and ask them what it was about and who should win. And if your writing isn't clear enough for somebody who's an intelligent layperson to get through it and to understand, basically what's going on. I mean, they wouldn't say, under ERISA this or that, but they say, the guy who, was driving the truck, should have looked left and he looked right, and, the safety brake didn't work, so the other person could pay. And if it was the right answer, then, and I see it today, and I bet you do too, when you read so many briefs and read them carefully, but it's not like you can devote as much attention to, however many cases you're hearing. So you want to make sure that somebody who's going to read through it once, maybe a little more quickly than you'd like, really gets the gist of what you want. The other thing I'd like to do is read aloud. And again, no matter how complicated it was, you should be able to stand up and read it to somebody and have them basically follow. I mean, otherwise your sentences are too convoluted, not direct enough. And I think those are two things that serve me well.
Do you still try to do that now when you write decisions? You try to make them simple? And
yeah, people
accessible?
are always complaining and walking down the halls, and they're reading out loud, and no, they don't do that.
But you try to make your decisions accessible.
And I'll tell you, I mean, it's not. There are cases where but we don't necessarily study every brief, and if you file a brief and you can't, I can't read through it once.
Right.
It's going to, okay, I've got to read through it twice, and sit down with the law clerk and say, what do you think this is about?
Yeah.
And I think people place too much emphasis on showing off their.
All right, so we've been listening live to John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. They're kind of going through some early life and not legal theory, but just sort of advice, it sounds like, for young lawyers there. Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor. Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor as well. We got a little bit of the personality there, I guess, of John Roberts off the top of that, Jesse. But can you explain to me and to our audience here on NewsNation or those listening to us on Sirius XM why this is so rare for a Chief Justice to come out and do something like this?
So first of all, justices don't like to speak out. They are in a very unique position where their words can be used against them for any of the major decisions they ultimately issue, including the Chief Justice here. So it's kind of interesting to hear a little bit of a more personal side to him. And his writing is fantastic. He writes some of the most deliberate decisions, the very clear, concise decisions. And by the way, the reason he's speaking right now, other than the fact that it's the 125th anniversary of the Western District of New York, a very significant district, he's also from Buffalo, New York. So they wanted him there. It's interesting to hear about his early life, particularly when he is spearheading a court that has all eyes on it right now. Its authority and what role it's going to play in the months to come.
So do you think we're going to get some? Do you think we're going to get some headlines here coming up of Chief Justice says blank about Trump administration?
I think he's going to be careful, but how can he sit there and not be asked about what's going on right now and give some indication, whether it's an attack on the courts or the role of the courts and judges?
Scott?
Yeah, I was going to add, it depends on the question and how deep or direct the federal judge wants to do that. But I also think there's more politics going on here, too. Remember, he's trying to protect the independence of the judiciary, and you have some bills pending in Congress or political conversations by Republicans about impeaching judges who disagree with Donald Trump on the deporting illegal immigrants, if you will. And so what he does not want to do, he's trying to protect the courts. He doesn't want his judges being impeached, but he also doesn't want lawsuits because that would create chaos and a distraction from the serious work of the federal judiciary.
All right, so we listened in to John Roberts, Chief Justice, live there for a few moments. Again, not a usual sight. If he makes any sort of headlines and news here in the upcoming at least 23 minutes, I'll pass it along to you, what the Chief Justice said. Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor. Scott Bolden, hang around, sir. Jesse, thank you.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, still to come tonight here on the Hill. The Trump administration says sanctuary city policies, they're going to keep talking about it.
We should be united as a country around bringing violent criminals to justice and getting them out of the United States of America.
That, of course, is Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, calling on states to stop protecting illegal immigrants. But one Democratic governor is already pushing back. Full panel, other side. Stay with us here on the Hill.
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
That's a bunch of bull. It's fact. It's not bull.
America's favorite sparring duo with TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
Oh, make a point, you bully.
Tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on NewsNation.
President Trump has been focused on making sure that we're going after the worst of the worst, going after those who are perpetuating violence against American citizens. And Governor Pritzker has created a sanctuary here for those criminals and invited them here with free health care, free housing, free assistance, and facilitated them being protected from being brought to justice.
That, of course, the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. She held a press conference earlier today in front of the governor's mansion in Illinois. That, of course, is where J.B. Pritzker, the governor, the Democrat from Illinois, lives. The Homeland Security Secretary touting the administration's record on deportations and calling out Pritzker for an alleged lack of cooperation. The governor then released a statement in response, reading a part, quote, "Like the millions of Americans asking for sensible, humane immigration reform, I encourage the secretary to spend less time performing for Fox News and more time protecting the homeland," end quote. Now, immigration and deportations has become a pretty big battle between the administration and Democrats over the Constitution and due process and what policies both sides do and do not support. It all came to a head yesterday after a fiery exchange between Noem, she was testifying up on Capitol Hill, and Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, a Democrat from Illinois. This was during a hearing for the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security.
Secretary Noem, I'm just looking for a yes or no here. Do you believe the Constitution guarantees due process to everyone in America?
Due process is exactly what this Congress lays out.
Yes or no?
It is,
okay, ma'am, I'll take that as a no.
On due process.
Excuse me, I'm trying to ascertain your understanding of the law as it applies to your department, and you as its leader should be able to give us a yes or no answer.
Full panel here with me now. Sean Spicer is a NewsNation contributor, former White House press secretary in the first Trump administration. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor. Hannah Brandt, Washington correspondent. And Joe Khalil, NewsNation Washington correspondent. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in here.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. I've heard Democrats on the show time and time again, Scott, say, okay, we didn't like what Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis did in Florida and Texas, busing and flying illegal immigrants to blue states. Maybe they thought it wasn't legal, but they all acknowledge it was effective.
Yeah.
And so do you. So Kristi Noem going to Illinois, standing outside the governor's mansion. Is that effective? And are we going to see her doing this in all these blue states?
I don't think so. I mean, Kristi Noem is a bit of a show horse, if you will. She has substance, and she is the secretary. But this is a political piece when you get in front of the governor's office, who's probably going to be a Democratic candidate for president, and who and has no But the president, the governor at the state level, who this whole issue of sanctuary cities, you know, state officials have no responsibility or necessarily commitment to cooperate with ICE if they're a sanctuary city or not.
Scott, you're a lawyer.
Hold on one second. It's a federal issue, and only the feds and ICE have jurisdiction to remove illegal immigrants. It's a fact. So you don't have to cooperate.
You know,
it doesn't make you a bad person if you don't cooperate.
Yeah, it does actually.
No, it
does. Because here's the deal. We're a nation of laws. And if a person comes into the country illegally and someone is harboring that person and trying to prevent them from being removed, they are here illegally, then you are a bad person.
Not a sanctuary
when I got into politics, Scott,
Democrats
and Republicans fought over tax cuts and the size of government and government spending. The idea that the line now is either you support the rule of law or you harbor people who break the law to come into the country says a lot about where the Democratic Party is today.
But a sanctuary city doesn't do that.
About where the policy is, Sean, because the administration announced this week it was going to pay illegal immigrants $1,000 and get them a plane flight if they want to self-deport. Does that show that these deportation efforts up until this point haven't been successful?
Oh, God, no. In fact, it shows that they've been, they keep going down the ladder. Look, there's no question that President Trump, Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, these policies are working. I don't think anybody, it's not a partisan issue. There's no question that their efforts to secure the border and make our laws strong again on immigration are working. I mean, you can agree with them or disagree with them, but I don't think there's a question about the effectiveness. That being said, they are now creating more. I mean, they flipped the CB1 app on its head to allow people to self-deport. They're paying them because it's cheaper to give them money to get out than for us to transport them. So at the end of the day, I think that seeing them use all of these tools in their toolbox to establish rule of law is a good thing.
The Underwood hearing. You covered that yesterday. That was a pretty explosive back and forth.
I did. And we heard from several Democrats. Another of the things that they brought up was this idea that President Trump has floated of deporting U.S. citizens. The case we're hearing Democrats make is not having due process for people doesn't stop with illegal immigrants. They're saying it could happen to you too, and that's something we've heard from the president. Now, we heard Secretary Noem kind of hedge when asked directly about that multiple times, she kind of said, well, we're not doing that. We are not deporting U.S. citizens. And that was the line from the White House, but that's certainly the attack Democrats are making.
You know, the point that you made, Blake, or the question you asked, this payment to self-deport, does that show that they are struggling to deport as many people as they can? I think the answer is yes. And it's not a political thing. It's just a logistic thing. And I'm old enough to remember when it was a bipartisan issue to say we need more immigration judges, we need more resources to litigate these things, because it's just a logistical nightmare to be able to deport 10 million people all at one time. I think politically, they're doing a good job in terms of border crossings are way, way down to almost record levels, lows. They could be politically talking about that and not sort of alienating people who support them when it comes to...
But what's missing from this discussion is the due process. The worst part of Kristi Noem's testimony...
He's already jumping out of his
is that Kristi Noem could not answer that question, yes or no. Do you believe that U.S. citizens and others who are in the U.S. deserve due process or are entitled to it under our Constitution? Stephen Miller would tell you, hold on, Stephen Miller would tell you that only U.S. citizens are entitled to it. He's quoted in the paper. And the fact of the matter is that all people in the U.S. are covered by the Constitution and they deserve due process. Kristi Noem couldn't answer that because she doesn't believe that. And neither does this administration.
She couldn't answer it because she wasn't allowed to answer it.
Yes, she was.
You heard her say yes or no.
Or no.
Okay, but here's the thing. You're the lawyer, Scott. Here's the question. U.S. citizens, 100% due process. And I think to Hannah's point, this was an insane conversation. Democrats, there's no discussion, full stop, about U.S. citizens ever not being afforded due process. That's not. Point two.
The president said that.
No, he did not. Second question, second issue. Are people who are legally in this country but not citizens permitted or given due process? Yes. If you're in the country. I think that there is a question. If you come into the country illegally, do you get due process or deported? I do think that's a fair question. I'm not a lawyer.
You get both.
I think that there's a question. You can be immediately, I would argue that if you're not here illegally, then you are deported. That is the right way to handle this.
You get due process,
especially after Joe Biden allowed people to run willy-nilly over this border. We've got. I mean, look. I'm sorry.
Here's how I want to end this, because there was another piece of news to the other side of the table where Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, basically came out today and said, "Nope, not going to open up the USMCA. The negotiations open July of 2026. It brings up a real question of how much Mexico is going to be willing to play ball, Joe, on the tariffs front, in which the president is trying to intertwine with the southern border issue as well.
Yeah, and look, I have heard from several senators on the Republican side who are allies of President Trump who will tell you candidly they don't think Mexico is going to be a partner when it comes to the cartels. And we know the way that President Trump operates. If that is the reality, then it's going to be harder for him to bend on tariffs. I think that's just the reality both sides are going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, and not just the southern border, the northern border too, right? He's linked the Canadian tariffs as well to fentanyl coming over the border and has asked for concessions when it comes to immigration from Canada as well.
The question you got to figure out, do you want to get ahead of, look, this USMCA has a time limit on it. They didn't think they were going to be dealing with President Trump when they said it.
Yeah.
Right. They thought they would be dealing, he would have gotten potentially a second term or not. So this is a whole new ballgame. The question is, do you get ahead of that negotiation or do you wait and get his ire up?
This is all about immigration, though, and they've got Mexican military at the border. Illegal crossings are down, and so you haven't heard the president talk much about Mexico.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it. I told our audience at home, if John Roberts, the Chief Justice, made some news, that we would show it to you. He made some news a little while ago. I'm going to play you that soundbite on the other side of the break. Stay with us here on The Hill. We're back at a field. Bigger things in this town than the United States Supreme Court, and a rare moment today. This is still a live look. Buffalo, New York, is the Chief Justice John Roberts making his first public comments this year. I told you if there was news from the Chief Justice, we would share with you what he said. Here he was moments ago on the concept of an independent judiciary. Watch.
Let's talk about something a little more important, a little more substantive. I think most judges would agree that judicial independence is crucial. Do you agree? What do you think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's central. The only real political science innovation in our Constitution, I mean, you know, parliaments have been around for 800 years and obviously executives, is the establishment of an independent judiciary. Even places you think are similar to ours, like England, the judiciary in England was part of Parliament. I mean, they sat in the House of Lords, and because Parliament was supreme. But in our Constitution, judges and the judiciary is a co-equal branch of government, separate from the others, with the authority to interpret the Constitution as law and strike down, obviously, acts of Congress or acts of the president. And that innovation doesn't work if it's not, the judiciary is not independent. Its job is to obviously decide cases, but in the course of that, check the excesses of Congress or of the executive, and that does require a degree of independence.
The Chief Justice also asked about impeaching judges. He said, quote, "I've already spoken to that, and you know, impeachment is not how you register disagreement with decisions." A rare moment there in upstate New York tonight. And the Chief Justice continues to speak. We thank you for watching us here tonight, here in our nation's capital. I'm Blake Berman. I'll see you tomorrow.